It's part 2 of our Stanley Cup Final crossover. Nick Zararis and I will discuss position by position, which team has the advantage in which area, and we're also going to predict the series, all on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Tuesday crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Florida Panthers. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. It's Armando Velez, the host of Locked On Panthers. And before you get to today's show, we want to thank everyone that is making our shows their first listen of the day. Both Locked On Oilers and Locked On Panthers are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. So Armando and I broke down the big pictures, the narratives, the storylines, what it means for each of these teams in the moment, what it means for the league at large, what it means for the state of hockey. Today's show, getting into the nuts and bolts, the X's and O's, who's got more guys. If we were to line them up for gym class ball hockey, who's getting picked first, who's getting picked last, what position groups matter more, why the Florida Panthers probably better than last year, but an argument to be made, the Oilers are also better than last year. So Armando and I are going to go through the position groups. We're going to start with forwards. We'll go to the defensemen. Then the final segment, we're going to split between goaltending and special teams. So Armando, lay the case out for me. Walk me through how the Panthers have gotten even better, if that's possible, from production from their forward group year over year.
Continuity has been the name of the game for the Panthers, especially in their top 9. Only one different piece in their top 9 compared to last year. I mean, and that's on the third line with Brad Marchand in instead of Vladimir Tarasenko from last year. And to think that at the beginning of the postseason for the Panthers, Evan Rodriguez was on your fourth line alongside Nico Sturm and Jesper Boquist, while Mackie Samoskevich was on that second line with Bennett and Tkachuk. Carter Verhaeghe was on the top line. So a lot of shuffling. Mackie eventually got downgraded to the fourth, and then they replaced that whole line, the whole line completely with Nosek, Gadjevich, and AJ Greer. Greer is day-to-day right now for the Panthers, so his status for game 1 is still a little bit up in the air. But continuity has been the name of the game. And getting some of these guys on the cheap. Greer is your Ryan Lomberg replacement. We spoke about a little bit in the first crossover about Nosek and Sturm being the Kevin Stenlund replacement. So down the middle is how the Florida Panthers have won, and really up and down has really been the key. And we're recording this on the day that Alexander Barkov has been named the Selke Trophy winner for the third time in the last 4 seasons. Only 6 players have won the Selke Trophy 3 times. So Barkov is in some elite company. So you complement that with guys like Sam Reinhart, who finished second, Matthew Tkachuk, who's a net front presence for the Panthers here, and someone who could shoot from distance in Carter Verhaeghe, and also the development of Lundell and Lusterinen, who've been with the program now for almost half a decade now. So it's been continuity for this Panthers forward group.
You just made me feel really old saying Anton Lundell's been in the NHL for 5 years. Man, where does the time go? I remember that draft and being like, I'd like to get my fingertip. I'd like to get a hand on that guy. He walked into the NHL as a 19-year-old and has been getting increasingly better year by year. For the Oilers, it's really interesting because on paper, they underachieved in the regular season. They finished third in their division. They let the Kings leapfrog them. I mean, at the end of January, the Oilers were in first place in the Pacific Division. Then from February through the end of the regular season, they were barely a 500 hockey team. I mean, the Matthias Ekholm injury, huge for them down the stretch. And as we talked about extensively on yesterday's show, a litany of injuries down the backstretch of the regular season. The Oilers very clearly managing the injuries, prioritizing health over regular season results. But they've put together a lineup that's really produced a lot better overall than last year's. The really telling stat for me is last year in the minutes without McDavid or Draisaitl on the ice. So any other permutation of forwards without either guy, the Oilers were outscored 21-12 in the playoffs. This year, everybody else without McDavid or Draisaitl, they are outscoring opponents 21-10. That's almost a 30-goal swing year over year. And I think some of that is just things going their way a little bit more. And I do think game control has helped them be a little more, a little less reliant on McDavid and Draisaitl. And this year, they started out together when they were really dire in that Kings series. They were down 2-0. Chris Knoblauch put them together with Corey Perry on the right and said, we got to get our feet under us. This will steady us. And they put together a really good second line. And Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Evander Kane, and Zach Hyman. Of course, Zach Hyman won't be in this series. But one thing that is encouraging for the Oilers is that they've found, I would say, 7 to 8 different forward line permutations that are going to be viable for them in this series. The fact that they're going to possibly go 11-7 at some point, maybe to accommodate whatever Matthias Ekholm is. And like, you're actively going to take a good player out, whether that's Jeff Skinner, Victor Arvidsson, or even if it's Kasperi Kapanen. But I doubt it'd be Kapanen. Chris Knoblauch seems to really favor him for just the straight line skating and his willingness to take the puck to the net and just fire the puck on the net in a way some depth guys won't. But by and large, I would say this series for me up front comes down to how well the Oilers can use home ice to their advantage. You know, last year, the Barkov minutes, McDavid had a decent time, but when the bottom 9 forward group is outscored by 10, winning your minutes by 1 or 2 goals, that's just not going to be good enough. So the big question for me is, when the Oilers have home ice, how much can they get McDavid away from Barkov? And then the counter question becomes, can that Adam Henrique, Connor Brown, and whether it's Matthias Janmark or Trent Frederick on the left, can that group do enough against whichever of the Panthers forward lines that Chris Knoblauch deems to be the most dangerous? And I think there's an argument to be made. The Panthers have 3 really dangerous lines, so it's really kind of a pick your poison scenario where you don't want to really use McDavid against Florida's best defensive guys like Barkov because you want to maximize his minutes, but you also don't want to use your best defensive guys against their best offensive guys because you want to save yourself some room. And it becomes a really interesting chess match that's going to be fascinating to watch play out.
Yeah, and the best offensive line for the Panthers has really been their third line as a unit. So it's going to be interesting to see when you take away one, who's going to be the line to step up. And I'm going to assume that Connor McDavid, the McDavid line, while Edmonton's at home, is going to match up with the Bennett line. And to think that the amount of times that you could shift guys from the center to the wing, from Draisaitl being the second line center to going on McDavid's wing and then Nuge going down. And to think that even last year, the line for Edmonton was with Ryan McLeod, and he gets traded in the offseason to Buffalo. And so it's going to be, that has been the interesting part. It's like, okay, you're not being over reliant on that top line for the Edmonton Oilers there. And for the Panthers, it's going to be really in transition. It's not, and we'll get to the defensive part later, but for the forward part, it's going to be how fast can you get back in the middle to prevent a centering feed in the case that the defense is spread out, because we know that if Edmonton gets out with speed on odd man rushes, it's a dangerous bunch against Bobrovsky. So, and we saw that plenty in games 4-7. I mean, the guys who bit the Panthers mostly, Janmark, Henrique, Dylan Holloway, Zach Hyman, and 3 of the guys that I just listed aren't there anymore. But you mentioned Victor Arvidsson might come out of the lineup. That guy was a 30-goal scorer at one point in his career, and he's in this lineup. So the fact that that's an option to come out is very interesting.
The one last thing I did want to get in, and I mentioned this on yesterday's show, and it'll come in more into play in our second segment when we're talking about the defense, but a lot of the adjustments the Oilers made in terms of their personnel, it really feels like they tailored it specifically with the mindset of, we need to beat the Panthers. And I think a lot of that stems from feeling like they played too much defense in this series last year, that even if the Panthers weren't getting great looks, the game was still too much in the Edmonton end for their comfort. So they prioritized some wingers like Arvidsson and Jeff Skinner, which admittedly didn't really work all that well in the regular season. Kasperi Kapanen, a waiver claim, they didn't really execute the vision as it was intended, at least in the regular season. But in the playoffs, particularly in the Dallas series, I think it was game 3, it might have been game 4, the Oilers played one of their best games of the year, but they were really dramatically outscoring Chance by like 10 or 15. Mm-hmm. But the beauty of that was you kept Dallas to the outside. They get their 1 or 2 looks. You resettle, you get control, you go back the other way. And I think that's what's going to make this an interesting style matchup between the Oilers and Panthers is the Panthers want to get the puck in deep. They want to play the cycle. They want to try and break your will. The Oilers want to try and intercept one of those cycling passes and fly the zone and go the other way as fast as they possibly can. And it sets up a really interesting kind of rock and a hard place because those two things are incongruous with each other. So one of these teams over the course of 7 games is going to impose their will on the other through one of those mentalities. And it's going to be really interesting to watch play out.
Oh, no doubt. And for Florida, that's what really what bit them in the previous final at one point when they blew the 3-0 lead. And so for the Panthers, they're very comfortable in the cycle. And to think that it's going to be interesting to see the Zach Hyman minutes that are replaced by the likes of Corey Perry and maybe at times Evander Kane. I mean, those two, although Evander Kane is healthy going into these playoffs after missing the regular season, I'm interested to see the minutes that they put up. The fact that Hyman can play a whole bunch of them, especially because Hyman was on pace to break the record for hits in a postseason. And the thing is, I look at the shooting percentage for Corey Perry, 33%. It's wild. And if the Panthers allow Corey Perry to shoot that percentage, they're going to have a hard time winning this series. So they got to find a way to limit his chances. I mean, there was this one beautiful goal that the Oilers scored in Game 5. McDavid weaves around the defense. They don't use body, and then they center it to Corey Perry. Those are the type of plays where if you're entering the zone in speed, you have to make sure that you're not reaching and that you make sure to cover the possible pass that is to that Bobrovsky has to go from one end to the other in his crease.
It sets up quite the chess match. And speaking of that chess match, we're going to pivot to our conversation to talking about these two teams' defenses. And I'm going to make the argument that I think the Oilers' defense being as significantly better than last year is what's going to close the gap and be one of the deciding factors in this series. Coming up next on today's editions of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Panthers. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily nutritional value. Plus, they're packed with that ultra important fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller longer. Personally, huge fan of the no-shell variety. The perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days when I'm here at my desk doing research, doing the show, or editing. Or if it's the end of the day and I'm trying to hit my protein macros for the day, they do a great job. Or if you're old school and you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein that provides all 9 essential amino acids. Get snacking and get cracking today with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with Armando and I on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers and Panthers. So, Armando, I'm going to ask you this question a little more broadly open-ended and let you expand. Why do the Panthers have so much success with, I won't say reclamation projects, but guys who maybe miscast in other places or maybe just weren't as successful in other places? Last year, of course, Oliver Ekman-Larsson comes to mind, went to Toronto, had an okay season there, not nearly as effective. Nico Mikkola, who we had talked about pretty extensively on yesterday's show as being one of like the you get a guy who's been underperforming in multiple stops to get out of that shell. Nate Schmidt, we've talked about, they brought Kulikov back a number of years ago, and he's fit nicely. What is it about the Panthers defense in particular that allows them to rotate guys in? I mean, even Seth Jones, who we've talked about as maybe being the Aaron Ekblad replacement long-term for Florida to save some money. What is it about the Panthers that allows them to integrate defensemen so successfully?
There's two reasons for it. The first one is one of their assistant coaches, Sylvain Lefebvre, who runs the blue line. He runs the penalty kill for the Panthers, and just how he's been able to get them to play at their best. I mean, Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Uvis Balinskis were two guys, even though Uvis has played parts of the postseason and didn't play at all in the postseason last year. They were a big part of the Panthers getting through the first 16 games in 2023-24 when Montour and Aaron Ekblad were out with their fair share of injuries from the 23 final, and just the fact that they were still able to stay afloat right before they came back to the mix. And the fact is that it's also a little bit of when it came to last year, the fact that you get guys who have played certain roles and they're playing down a position, the fact that Forsling and Ekblad have been a pair for a long, not necessarily the longest of time. It's only been a few seasons because it was mostly Ekblad and Weegar on the same pair, two right-handed shots, while Forsling was on the second pair. But then getting that elevation for Gustav Forsling has just made a difference. And the fact that the top pair is solidified, it creates more of those reclamation projects from elsewhere to play below the lineup. OEL last year, and then even Seth Jones this year. And the second thing is accountability. There was this one interview there's one show that I was that I watched where I think it was Michael Russo was talking to Nate Schmidt about something that he did in the preseason, a play that the Panthers didn't like, and then the blue line came up to him and say, "Hey, we don't do that here in Florida." So it's a matter of just keeping guys accountable. And he's like, okay, it's a message saying, I'm going to the Stanley Cup champion. They know how to win. So if I want to be a part of this, I got to get with the program here. So that's the big thing when it comes to just being able to say, hey, get with it. And it's crazy because Schmidt doesn't necessarily have the same game as Oliver Ekman-Larsson, but it's another one of those reclamation projects. He can jump into the rush, but he's not one manning the top power play. He's been mostly on the second unit. But then even this year, they started off with Adam Boquist as their power play guy, and then Uvis Balinskis. And then midseason, when that Jones trade happened, before that, it was Aaron Ekblad. It was actually at a good rate right before the suspension. Then, hey, you got a little bit of insurance this year for that. And also the fact that he got some time with Gustav Forsling, and you dealt with multiple suspensions in the first two games of the postseason, and that hit from Aaron Ekblad on Brandon Hagel. That in itself really helped the Panthers. Those minutes in the regular season really helped in the postseason, and the fact that Seth Jones was the guy to take over in Game 7 against the Leafs, man, it proved Bill Zito right in trying to get someone who was getting a whole lot of minutes in Chicago, lesser role now. He could play more relaxed and more of his game, and not only was Seth Jones a big part of that Game 7 win, it was also Brad Marchand as well. So the trade deadline acquisitions made a difference there for the Panthers.
So real quick, because we do have to talk about goaltending and special teams. We have to talk about the coaching a little bit, and we got to pick the series, of course. The one point I did want to make, and I think something you said applies very similarly to the Oilers, that last year it kind of felt like defense was a bit more piecemeal, that they weren't really sure what was the best combination of who. They had guys like Cody Ceci, Vincent Desharnais, Philip Broberg all draw in at various points, whereas this year, Klingberg and Wallman have been pretty stably together since the third game of the playoffs. Ekholm just slid in for Game 5. He assumingly will play with Bouchard, but prior to Ekholm coming in, Brett Kulak and Evan Bouchard were having tremendous success together, and Troy Stetcher and Darnell Nurse were doing a great job. The crazy stat I looked up earlier, In last year's playoffs, the Oilers were outscored 14-25 in Darnell Nurse's minutes. This year, they're only being outscored 14-15. That type of swing tells me how much better he's been these playoffs. Like, he's still under 50% goal share, but a 10% swing when you're talking about a series that came down to one goal, that's enough. Those types of marginal gains and improvements really make me feel a lot more confident, especially in the defense, because look, and we're literally right now about to talk about Stuart Skinner on the other side of this break, but as good as Stuart Skinner's been, I'm going to be knocking on wood. I'm going to be knocking on the top of my head. I'm going to be crossing my fingers every time I say he's playing great in that next segment. But if the defense plays this well, it leads me to believe Stuart Skinner isn't going to need to do a whole lot. And that's going to nicely set up the conversation where we have the atom bomb, Sergei Bobrovsky, talking about the coughing baby, Stuart Skinner, right after this. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with Armando and I on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Panthers. So we got to do a bit of a speed run here to get through, but we can. We talked a lot about Bob on yesterday's show because I have found his career to be so fascinating that the Flyers picked the wrong goalie. He went to Columbus. He won 2 Vezinas in Columbus and then said, I'm going to go to Florida and I'll figure it out. Whatever happens, happens. And he has solidified himself as one of the best goalies of his era. And you said it on yesterday's show. He's gotten better as these playoffs have gone along. And the real luxury for Florida is they don't need him to be amazing or incredible every night. It's once or twice a series they need him to really dial it up. And I feel like that's a great recipe for success when you have a goalie who's capable of reaching those ceilings.
Yeah, regular season and his postseason average. This regular season is the save percentage was .906, and his career average in postseason save percentage is also at .906. But this year it's at a .912. And the fact is that they're still facing the same amount of shots against per game as last postseason. This year is around 24. Last year was also around 24. But the year before, did the calculations again, it was 33 shots per game that the Panthers were facing in that 2023 run. The Oilers, I looked theirs up, they're facing around 27 shots per game. And it's crazy to think that the amount of different moments you haven't needed those big moments. The big moment for Sergei Bobrovsky in this playoffs is that one stop that he had on Logan Stankoven when the series shifted to Florida, and a big moment when the game was tied at 1 at the time. But going to Stuart Skinner, I mean, the Jekyll and Hyde performances from him getting pulled, then going back with the Calvin Pickard injury. But the thing is, this isn't new for Stuart Skinner, not even in the NHL. They discussed on 32 Thoughts today about this going on even when he was in the WHL with Swift Current, that he would get pulled and then get 2 shutouts when he was on his way to the WHL championship. So it's crazy. You can't see it on the camera, but my arms are out with the ceiling and the floor of Stuart Skinner. But the ceiling part is really good when it comes to it. Bob, here, my hand right here is the floor, but you can't see the ceiling. But the ceiling for Stuart Skinner and Bob are basically at the same level for what you can expect out of them every season. So it's also crazy to see how you never know what you're going to get.
So real quick on Skinner, the first 3 games he played in these playoffs, the first 2 against LA and the first one against Vegas, .817 save percentage, 15 goals against in 3 starts. In the games since being pulled, .944 save percentage, 10 goals against on 179 shots on goal, and he has the most goals saved above expected of any goalie in the playoffs since coming back in. Bob is second to him, so I do think that's an interesting parallel to draw. But goaltending doesn't make sense. At this point, I have ceased trying to explain it, make it, and be able to articulate what I expect to happen on a game-to-game basis. It's so volatile. It's so game-to-game dependent. I mean, hell, you think about some of those Bobrovsky games in Columbus. I think back to that first-round playoff series against the Penguins. I think it was 2014 or maybe 2016, where he got pulled 2 separate times, and they put up a decent fight against the Penguins. But, I mean, we're coming off of playoffs where we saw Connor Hellebuck unable able to win a road playoff game other than the one. Just like, if the best goalie in the league can have a playoffs like this, is there any logic to this position, or is it just whatever's going to happen on any given night?
Yeah, you just never know. And for the Panthers, it's kind of in relation back to the defense. I mean, you got to make sure that I spoke about in the first segment about the Panthers getting back when it comes to back checking, especially their second pair. Nico Mikkola is one that loves to get in on the offense and jump in on the play. So it's are you going to do that a lot when the McDavid line is on the ice, where they could really expose you with speed and you're having a forward play defense? If it's Barkov, it's no issue, but a lot of other guys, you don't want them to be defending those rushes, and then Sergei Bobrovsky getting beat with no screen past the glove in that situation. Also, the second chance opportunities, the Panthers have been great with limiting those for Sergei Bobrovsky. And the thing is, the Oilers are doing it's the same thing with the lack of second chances. So Stuart Skinner has been a lot better with seeing pucks, and that's also been a reason for their success on just how they've been able to just. I'm also very impressed with how the Oilers have been able to close out series. These last two playoff runs, the Panthers are 7-7. The Oilers, I looked it up, they're 6-1 in these last two playoffs. So it's going to be interesting to see when the going gets tough and you have to win that final one, whichever team it may be. How do they take advantage of that chance?
So that sets up nicely for talking about taking advantage of your opportunities and pivoting the conversation towards special teams, because last year the Oilers' power play and penalty kill were what got them to the Stanley Cup Final. In the playoffs at 5-on-5, they scored 42 goals. They gave up 41 goals, a one overall differential. The power play and penalty kill were what got them as far as they did. They had one of the great penalty kills in the history of the contemporary NHL. They killed off 92 out of 96 penalties over 25 playoff games, something that is pretty much statistically impossible when you look at it from just a math perspective. Their power play was hovering around 30% last year. It's a little bit less effective this year. Zach Hyman, obviously not as good as he was last year, even though he was having a decent playoffs, 11 points in 15 games. Obviously won't be a part of this series, but Corey Perry has done a very amicable job in that spot. Like you alluded to, the crazy 33 shooting percentage where you get him the puck and generally he's been wide open and all he has to do is beat the goalie. And he's done that a handful of times in these playoffs. And the Oilers penalty kill, that's the only area of this team that really gives me a lot of reservations, because Florida, I think about how Matthew Tkachuk hadn't played a hockey game in 2.5 months. In that first game against Tampa Bay, he scores that power play goal. And I nodded to myself and I said, okay, he was good to go a month ago, but he needed a little extra time, and Florida was ready to go. And just that Florida power play gives me pause, especially with how poor the Oilers penalty kill has been. The only reprieve I can offer to you Oiler fans is that Matthias Ekholm is healthy, and a lot of the bad penalty kill stats, are from that LA series. I mean, if you go and look right now, the Kings still have the best percentage power play in the playoffs of any team at 40%. They went 8 for 20 in 6 games, which is almost unheard of. So you think about how it's gotten better with each passing round, and Ekholm coming back in, you can maybe talk yourself into the penalty kill being 75-80% where it needs to be, but that definitely gives me some pause.
Yeah, and the Panthers penalty kill is running at an 88% in this postseason, so that has been a big factor in how they've been able to just still not create a little bit of momentum, especially in the clincher in Game 5 where they stretch the puck out. Sam Bennett's coming out of the box, and then he scores on the empty netter to clinch the series. But seeing 66% for the Oilers, that's really the part where I'm looking at. I was like, okay, that could be the part, because if it's even, the Panthers have the advantage in the series. The Oilers, in my opinion, to win the series, they have to be a plus on the special teams. They got 2 shorthanded goals in 2 straight games, in games 4 and 5, and the only power play goal that the Panthers scored in last year's final was in Game 2 by Evan Rodriguez. Other than that, the Panthers' power play was silent, and the Panthers made a little bit of a switch throughout the playoffs. They had Mackie Samoskevich on that flank position on the left-hand side. Then they went to Carter Verhaeghe, a left-handed shot. So, but when you're getting a left-handed shot on the left flank, it's a little harder to beat the goaltenders on the far side. So now Aaron Ekblad, they're running 2 defensemen there. And also we're running 2 defensemen. I think that helps with the prevention of shorthanded chances for Edmonton. So maybe that could be something where the Panthers could expose. So I'm really interested to see. So 1 for 21. I'm looking at the stat as I scroll down on my notes. 1 for 21. And the thing is, Nick, in last year's final, the Edmonton Oilers had owned the possession games 1 and 3, especially in game 1. And the Panthers have been able to win games whether they've been able to own the possession and even when they have had to sit back at times. So interesting to see how they manage it through this time around, especially like you mentioned, them not having home ice.
All right. It is time for the obvious question. I think if you watch our shows, I think if you've watched this much of the 2 previews, almost an hour of previews over the last 2 days, you have a strong inclination where Armando and I are going to go. I think the only real question is the number of games. I cede the floor to you first, my friend. Who do you think is going to win the series? How many games? And who wins the Conn Smythe?
I'm going to go with Florida in 6 games to win the series. And it's crazy. Both teams have been on the road most of these playoffs. The Panthers haven't clinched a single series at home, but I think if this gets to a 7th game in Edmonton, you have to find a way to prevent it. And I wouldn't feel good about going to the Panthers going to Alberta and having to win a game 7. So I think the Panthers are going to have to really take advantage. It's not going to be a 3-0 series lead this time around. I guarantee it. But the Panthers, I think that they're going to take care of it in 6, and I think that that Sergei Bobrovsky is going to be the Conn Smythe winner.
That's a good choice. I definitely could see an argument for Bob based on the way if the series goes the way if Panthers in 6, I could see a way where Bob makes the case. I will be picking the Oilers in 7 games. Connor McDavid's going to win his 2nd straight Conn Smythe, and he's finally going to get the moment. And we're all going to have that moment of like, damn, he really did it. Like when Ovechkin got his and we all got to look around and nod at each other. Like that's a cool moment. That's awesome for the game. It's a great opportunity. And more than anything, I just want hockey to keep going, man. As soon as hockey's done, things just get boring. Do you want to talk about guys playing hockey or actually the games themselves? And the longer the series goes, the better for everyone. So I hope everybody has enjoyed these previews. Please be sure to check out Locked On Oilers and Locked On Panthers wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple or Spotify, throw the show's 5-star reviews. If you're over on YouTube, like the videos, subscribe to the channels, put on notifications for whenever new content goes out. Leave us comments. Let us know who you think is going to win the series, how many games, who's going to win the Conn Smythe. Thank you so much for making our shows your first listen of the day. For your second listen, please go check out the Locked On NHL and Locked On NHL Game Night feeds. Game Night will be live even on nights where there are not games, so be sure to support. We'll talk to you guys real soon. Everyone enjoy the Stanley Cup Final.
And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.